Hello, guys. Welcome back to On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling in the United States. And today we have brought on the head pollster from Rasmussen Reports, Mark Mitchell. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Rasmussen Reports, the most hated pollster in all of America. And why are we hated? It's because people can't put the thumb on our scales. We're independent. Our revenue comes entirely from subscriptions, advertising, and for people, funding us to do polling for them. It doesn't come from some major mega corporation. We're not susceptible to the whims of the mainstream media. And that's made us a target. So hopefully I can come on and tell you a little bit more about our firm. And you can learn that, listen, our business doesn't exist if we're not accurate. And we believe in transparency. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about our polling. So if you want, you can also follow us on YouTube at Rasmussen_poll.
Yeah, guys, and make sure to go ahead. We're going to link it in the description down below. Make sure to subscribe to Rasmussen Reports. They have pretty accurate 2020, 2016 numbers, unlike what most people will tell you. Everybody will say, oh, they're a far right, pollster. They get it so wrong. No, they don't. They're some of the best aggregators in the industry, actually, despite, not being beholden to any, major mainstream media corporation. So we're going to go ahead and move over to the crosstabs for Mark's national poll. So Mark right now has the crosstabs for his latest national poll with about 1,900 likely U.S. voters. They are one of the only pollsters right now who consistently poll with likely voters, and they're the only one in the industry right now who actually polls on a daily basis and actually shows those results on daily charts, which they post on X and whatnot. But I'm going to have Mark kind of go into his crosstab numbers and see where the race kind of stands right now. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. These come out Thursday morning. For the rest of the election season, those crosstabs on our website will not be behind the paywall. So you can go look at them yourselves. I'm sure people following your channel know pretty much what crosstabs are. So I won't get into that. But this is in the middle of the DNC. 21st would have been Wednesday night. And so it doesn't include the RFK endorsement. It does not include Kamala Harris's speech. But as of the DNC, when the Democrats were on cloud nine, Donald Trump in our numbers was still beating Kamala Harris by 3 points in a two-way and then 2 points in a multi-way. And that's kind of what we expected because he was doing slightly better against Biden. And I think it's fair to say in some ways Biden was a worse candidate. Depending on the week, it was like a 4 to 5, sometimes 6 and 7 point race. But it tightened up as we all expected it would after that horrible debate performance.
Yeah, that really killed his chances. That I think that's when he kind of became worse electorally than Harris, because I think there was a very sizable amount of the electorate who literally were not aware that Biden was that dysfunctional. Like I have people in my family who watched the debate and were like, we thought you were kidding when you said he was like having a hard time going up the stairs. So, like, we thought you were over exaggerating. Like, we didn't know it was this bad. And so I think that really pushed Trump into possibly in the getting 330 plus electoral votes category against Biden. But yes, I do think that really, it makes more sense in retrospect now why Harris is kind of polling better and she's doing better with some, disaffected Democrats who were concerned about the whole Biden age issue. That really played a factor into that.
She is getting way better press treatment than Biden did. I think that's where a lot of the difference comes from. But some peculiar things happen in polling around the debate. And I want to bring those to everybody's attention because it's one of the things, in my opinion, that separates us from other people. There's a lot of momentum in the industry to put out a major monthly poll. And when I go into the field nightly, I see the numbers swing around quite a bit. I think a lot of pollsters are window dressing the results to get a desired outcome. And often I don't look at their numbers and see the same kind of swings I do. What I actually saw after the debate was Democrats woke up. They were like, oh my, Trump might actually win this. And it actually rallied Biden's support among Democrats. He lost his crossover advantage by party and Biden approval actually shot from like 70 to 80% in a week or two following the debate, which was just insane and incredible. But what happened in the industry is like all of a sudden it's like everybody got permission because of the debate to show horrible Joe Biden numbers. And so in everybody else's polling, Biden plunged when, and I'm happy showing everybody the swing. We produce content, we produce polling, we throw numbers out there, and that's exactly what we saw. And yeah, she's worse in some ways, better than Joe Biden in the important ones that matter. But the reason that she's doing, 2 to 3 points against Trump, whereas Biden was worse, is because she has not been encumbered by what has been, let's just say. It's probably but yeah, like we can look at gender, age. We've spoken about this before the show a bit. I wouldn't, if I were your viewers, fanatically compare these to previous election exit polling. One is I'm not certain the exit polling, their methodology is a bit of a black box. There's things about their demographics that I do not agree with. And sometimes, I wait for gender, but we don't necessarily target for gender. For instance, it's one of the ways that the demographics might be affected. So maybe I got more urban males this time and more suburban females, and maybe it's the flip in another poll. And so that's why I want to take multiple samples, put them out, and then look at the average, which in my opinion is where you get all the good information from. But here, Trump's winning among men by 7 points. It's not his best showing, but still a solid lead. He's losing among women by 2 points, and that's tighter than it sometimes is. Donald Trump's down among 18 to 39-year-olds. He's been tied. I think they're going more for Kamala Harris, maybe more because of the vibe vote, or maybe because there is no longer an aged and decrepit Joe Biden in the race. And middle-aged voters, big lead for Trump, but this has been tighter in some of our previous polling. And then this is really the black vote has been sort of narrowing in this mid-60s to upper 20s ratio. That's a good showing for Trump. Again, I trust our black numbers, in my opinion, better than the exit polling reporting, but we'll see. What I'm trying to make accurate is the top line national numbers, and at a certain extent, the race numbers are just going to be what the race numbers are, and they're going to differ among polling. Although it is a good place to look, because sometimes you just see stuff that's absolutely ridiculous, like a lot of the current polling that by party shows Kamala Harris and Donald Trump doing about equally well among their own party, but then Harris winning big among independents, which I can tell you I have not seen at all in one single sample since we started polling Biden versus Trump back in the fall of 2021. Like literally not a single sample has Trump lost independents. And that's a pretty important sign, because you have to win independents to take.
Oh, and that's a very, that is the most important part of the electorate. And usually, people, when they do these election maps and, talk about the elections, when you're like, oh yeah, one candidate's going to get Wisconsin and Michigan, but not Pennsylvania. Like that doesn't happen. Usually the independents, what tends to happen, certain subgroups kind of really move a certain direction in elections, and they really just, when a candidate wins it, it just kind of goes. Like that's why Trump got really close in New Hampshire in 2016, and then Biden did really good in New Hampshire. That's why Obama, compared to Bush, did like way better than John Kerry or Al Gore, because you have certain subgroups, and especially independents, that once they break a certain way, like it kind of just goes. Like that's where you get these really big fluxes, like influxes of swings. And then what happens is people who do these election models or that do these predictions, they kind of get stuck in the conventional wisdom, thinking of the previous election, thinking it's going to be the same, and then it throws everything off. That's why people in 2020 had Florida as till or going to Biden, when they didn't realize that the Hispanic vote was probably going to move to Trump.
Yeah, it's really hard to go precinct by precinct, state by state, and do an analysis that's right 100% of the time, because there's always something could happen, right? There could be a rainstorm, there could be a ballot initiative, there could be a bunch of single issue voters, and people ask me about the states, and we can go into the states, but I keep coming back and looking at the national numbers because, in my opinion, that's kind of like the core of this race right now. In our polling 4 years ago, Donald Trump was down upper single digits, and now he's up lower single digits. And I'm telling you right now, we barely changed anything. We shifted the weighting 2 points to the right because we were too far left in 2020. But even if you took that away and gave Democrats the same +4 that they had in our polling back then, Donald Trump's still going to be basically tied with Kamala Harris. And that's, 6-7 points better in our polling, which lines up exactly with what you see in Real Clear Politics. Again, at a national level, Donald Trump doing 6 to 7 points better among every other pollster, not just us. They're just a couple points.
They're a little too
Democrats, right? So just take that and shift it, right?
Right, but on average, Trump is performing 7-8 points better nationally than what he was back then. And if he's really moving the nation 7-8 points to the right, there's no way Kamala Harris wins the race, because at that point, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania have been trending to the right. Voter registrations in almost every single state, I think it's every state except Colorado, that Republicans have netted voter registration. So it's like, if he's going to shift the nation 7 or 8 points to the right, and most of that's coming from, or a majority of that's coming from, minority groups, there's no way Harris is winning North Carolina or Georgia or even Arizona, Nevada. It's just not happening. And then the Rust Belt too. If Trump's winning the popular vote by 3, you're talking about over a 5-point win in Wisconsin, possibly. You're talking about these crazy swings from 2020.
I think that's possible. And I would say in our polling, our latest state poll for Wisconsin, I think we basically had Trump tied down. I think it was down 1 in the two-way, down 2 in the multi-way. That's tied. This is statistical tie. But I also strongly believe that our state polling did in 2020 lean very far left, and probably still does now. I'm really hesitant to overcorrect because, again, one cycle doth not a trend make. And I'm sorry, that's just part of the calculus, right? If everybody's going to call me a right-wing pollster, I'm not going to try to err on the right side of things. And so in our latest set of swing state polls, which was taken last week also with some DNC numbers in it, Trump was essentially tied in every state we asked. It was Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so that means he's probably doing up 2 to 4 points, depending on the state, maybe higher for Arizona. And that's great for him. That's a clear win, subject to stuff that tends to happen in swing states.
Right. And I think now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and switch over to the Electoral College map, kind of discuss sort of a consensus on where we think that's going to be right now. So we are now here with the Electoral College map. Me and Mark are kind of going to go over a consensus map. We're going to be talking about some of the swing state polling that he did. But before we do that, I do want to mention SoCal Strategies. We do have a GoFundMe for SoCal Strategies because pollsters, do have to spend money just like Mark does, and they have subscriptions and whatnot that kind of help them do some of their polling. But we, here at On Point Politics are sponsoring SoCal Strategies, which is the pollster that I sponsor on the channel with Ready Go Politics, a good friend of the channel as well. And right now, we need help raising as much as we possibly can to conduct state and national polling. We also may even do some of our own exit polling analysis as well on election day. So if you guys would be able to contribute to that, any donations would be greatly appreciated on that front. But now moving to the Electoral College map, I believe, at this point, at a consensus, I think it's safe to say Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, both Dakotas, all of Nebraska, except that 2nd Congressional District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, a lot of the Appalachian states, Missouri, Indiana, South Carolina would kind of be in that safe column. And we're going to kind of base this around, what Rasmussen's latest numbers are, as well as my moving aggregates, which try to weigh for all of the recent polling data by a target electorate, kind of similar to what pollsters have to do, they usually have to weigh things to a target electorate sometimes, to get whatever result they're thinking is going to happen and to try to be as most accurate as humanly possible. I mean, that's what Rasmussen does. Maybe some of the mainstream media pollsters are trying to prime their polls, but I'm trying to create an average that's going to try to eliminate as much, polling bias as humanly possible. And right now, Rasmussen's latest polls from the past month, their average is like plus 3.2 around there. And right now we have Trump up by around 2.4%. And the latest Rasmussen poll, I think the full field, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I think you had Trump at 47 and Harris at 45 in the full field.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah. And that's what we actually have right now. And you guys, I think, had Kennedy at 4. We have him at 3.9. And there's about 2.8% undecided voters right now. And Weston Steiner kind of polling below half a point. So we're going to be going through sort of a Trump plus 2 to 3 national environment based on this map. But at this point in time, I mean, Mark, you correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think Ohio and Iowa are safe. And actually, Rich Barris did, in fact, talk about this on his stream yesterday with Robert Barnes. He says that supposedly Ann Seltzer, I don't know if you heard about this, is withholding a Trump 19 poll out of the state of Iowa right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that would be incredible. But this conservative movement has surprised a lot of people. Look at what happened in Florida. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly safe Republican for sure.
Right. And then looking at, for example, California, that's going to be safe still. It's obviously very liberal Democrat state. Hawaii is a little bit debatable because you do have the Maui fire disaster with the Biden administration, and you have a lot of Asian Americans and some of the polling data moving towards Trump. Now, those are low sample sizes because those pollers are a smaller part of the electorate, and a sample size of less than 100 isn't really that great. But I mean, the same pollsters that had Biden up by 50 points with Asians now have Trump up by 10 or 20 points. So there's clearly a shift with some of those voters. So Hawaii could possibly fall under 15. I mean, you had polling data that had him below 15 or Biden below, winning it by less than 15. I think it was a +8 poll actually with third parties. So I'm going to put this in the safe column. But if Trump overperforms expectations, I wouldn't be surprised. I think Alaska is probably safe. It's going to trend to the left, but I think it is safe. I think DC, Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont, you're going to see those states kind of stay in that safe Democrat column pretty easily. I'd say 25-point plus victories for all of these. DC probably +75 for Harris, more than likely. And that's going to spill into Virginia, and we'll get to that when we talk about that. I think that right now, these are pretty much all the safe states for either candidate. I mean, Harris, if the nationwide popular vote is shifting 6-7 points to the right, I mean, Washington, Oregon are not going to be safe, and neither is Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, or New Jersey, or even New York, in my opinion, either. I don't think New York would be safe because what we're seeing is Trump's gaining with Hispanics and African-American voters by a sizable amount compared to 2020, and he's still roughly performing similarly with whites. And a lot of the polling data tends to underestimate him with whites by a pretty decent amount. So I think right now it's safe to say that Texas and Florida are in the likely Republican column. You may even be able to put Florida safe, but I mean, I'd say likely Florida is definitely the correct category right now. I wonder what are your opinions are on that, Mark?
Oh yeah, I mean, I pulled Florida in 2022. It's safe Republican for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Texas too. I think Trump is doing way better in the national popular vote. A lot of that popular vote is coming from states that are emerging on the opposite side of COVID. I think that's going to shore up places like Texas and Florida for sure, because in my opinion, I'm seeing it in Georgia and Arizona. So I would expect the trend to be bigger there.
Right. And it's, Texas and Florida, and I'm talking about 10 to 15 point victories for either candidate, not 5 to 10. And, Let's Talk Elections has talked about, Kamala Harris can actually get it down to a 2 to 3 point win for Trump. Those numbers can kiss my ass. There's no way that that's going to happen now. There's no way it's happening. And looking at, right now, I believe probably Washington, Oregon, higher double digits, like 10 to 12-point victories for Harris. She's probably going to regress a little bit in some of the urban areas, and probably in a little bit to an extent in some of the greater Idaho regions. She may really underperform there, but I do think that Portland and Seattle are kind of going to really just save her in the States, obviously, like all the other Democrat candidates. And Colorado, it's going to trend to the left again. Do I think it's going to be a 13.5-point victory for Harris? No way. I think it may be a 9 or 10-point win, and possibly Kennedy dropping out of the race may give some of these disaffected voters, may give them a political permission slip to vote for Trump. So this one's a little bit iffy to predict, but I'd say it's in the higher single digits for Harris. I think Illinois is probably in, the 11 to 12-point range for Harris. I think Trump's going to continue to gain in Chicago like he did in 2020. A lot of people don't talk about this because he lost, but he gained in a lot of major urban areas with high Black populations. I mean, he gained in New York City. I mean, he gained in Philadelphia. He gained in Miami-Dade. He gained in certain, I think even in Houston, he even gained a point, or like it didn't really shift that much to the left. So he's gained in a lot of these, minority populated urban centers. And I think those were the, signs of what it possibly maybe accelerated this cycle. And I think Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, New Jersey, all of these are going to be in those likely columns. I'd say Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island. I think Rhode Island and Connecticut may be over 10-point victories, but I think Delaware, you may see a surprise shift because Biden really may have inflated the numbers there. And I think you may see that really possibly get under basically in the single digits. So is New Jersey. I think New Jersey is probably 8 and 9-point victory for Harris right now.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, I watched the whole Chitterelli thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he had no party backing at all, and they didn't really even try. I mean, he did, but the state party barely tried, and he almost won the race. Yeah. He almost won. Like, that's insane. That's crazy. New York, I'd say 12 to 11 points, and people don't like to hear this, but Biden was in actual serious trouble of losing New York and New Jersey. Like, he was actually, there was a non-zero chance of Trump winning New York and New Jersey. People don't like talking about it, but it's true. Like, there was an actual possibility of that happening, but I do think Harris is going to probably run up a little bit more with those older African-American voters, particularly women. And a lot of the reasons why the African-American electorate tends to be really Democrat is because around 2/3 of their electorate is women, and those really tend to break. So if Trump can really turn out, young Black men to vote for him, I mean, that's going to really change the political landscape with those voters. And looking at, Maine's first probably will fall under 15 possibly right now. I'd say it does. And Maine's second probably is safe Republican. I mean, I can't see that being under 10 for Trump right now. And
what was it in 2020?
In 2020 was Trump plus 8. And you had polling having Biden up and made second by over 10 points even. And he ended up winning by 8. Like, it's ridiculous. I think there was a new poll right now from like a University of New Hampshire that they have Harris winning Maine's second congressional district. Like, it's ridiculous. It's insane that they even have that. I think North Carolina and Georgia right now, I think Trump probably wins those by over 5. Now, I think I don't think you had a state poll for
Georgia was not in this one. We had it at 5 in July. If you were going to, draw a trend line based on all the other states, I'm pretty sure Georgia would have been +2, +3. Trump right now, I think it'll be back up to 4 or 5 just based on where I think the race is going to go. But even if it's 2 or 3, you're going to call it leans Republican now. And if, Trump did as well, he won by a point and change in 2020 with the national vote moving as right as it is. I think that makes North Carolina a lot safer than it was back then. For sure.
No, 100%. And what's happening is you're going to see these service workers that are minorities, that are low propensity voters, that they're going to shift. I mean, even in your polling data, Trump's doing far better with, 18 to 45-year-olds as a whole. He's performing a lot better with them. And it may be you've mentioned this before, the TikTok videos, the the live streams he's doing, not so much. Well, the live streams, yes, it does kind of play into the whole TikTok thing, but I think social media is playing a really big role. And I think you're going to see in future elections that the electorate's going to become really elastic. And I don't think people are really expecting it. It may be due to social media presence. Like in 2020, like if you even mentioned Trump's name on social media, like half your comment section would be flaming you. Like it would be, Trump wasn't even on TikTok in 2020. He wasn't even on TikTok.
I think that's a lot of it. I would give you two other words, though, that I think, if you want to bring it up later, we can bring up the 18 to 39-year-old chart over the last 10 years. But the two words I would bring up are COVID and inflation. And I think if you look back at our numbers in 2016, Clinton trounced Trump among the 18 to 39-year-olds. What didn't we just looked at it? It was like a 20-point margin or something like that.
Yeah, it was huge.
They're tied. They're essentially statistically tied. Depending on the poll, the number swings around a bit. But Trump's been up a point or two to down 4 to 6 points among 18 to 39-year-olds. But that is, everybody was talking about, and that's what Obama did to the party, right? He made it a party of young, cool kids, and now that none of them can afford houses. Right? Like that's what we're talking about here.
That's the problem. And I've said this, I used to say this years ago to people that I knew, like Trump's gonna do way better with young voters. I was saying this in 2020 when Biden won. I said, well, Biden's gonna do really bad with 18 to 29-year-old voters come 2024 against almost anybody. I mean, DeSantis may have been a little bit of an iffy pick with that group, and Nikki Haley would have done not great at all with 18 to 29. But Donald Trump has a very, X factor where he has built his coalition over a period of time. And I think that's what's going to really help him this cycle, because he's been able to build a coalition over the span of effectively, 8 years. And that's really going to help him out come election day, in my opinion. And I think right now,
two things that I think Kamala Harris is missing, and Joe Biden, in my opinion, was as well, and that's the, call it, anti-establishment street cred. And then the other is authenticity. And if you think about social media, that's what I think right now sells well on social media. It's not 100%. A highly produced glitz and glamour. It's real stuff. And that's what Trump gives people when he goes on social media.
Yeah, he comes across like, Harris is filming the Obama endorsement. Like she's holding the phone to her ear, even though she has it on speaker. Like, what is this? And like, they're filming a conversation between her and Tom Walz.
Kind of clip you would put on Good Morning America 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's very Hollywoodized. It's very like, that doesn't appeal to a wide electorate. It just doesn't. It doesn't. And I think Trump utilizing social media, I think, is really going to help him out in these like large urban areas. I think you're going to see a shift that people aren't really expecting. I think right now, I mean, if Trump is doing 10 points better in Florida, or even more than that, or doing way better in Texas, Arizona also has to be in that column too. And so does Nevada, because in Clark County, I mean, especially with no tax on tips, that was a very effective policy proposal. And now Harris decided to just completely plagiarize Trump out of nowhere. And my personal opinion, I think they did internals in Nevada, and they saw that they were so bad that they had no choice. And even now today, Harris is coming out. Her aides are saying, "Oh, she's in favor of building a border wall." I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, no, I did, and it's like $30 per linear mile. Good luck building a fence that's going to keep anybody out. So Arizona, in the latest round, we had Trump +2 in both the multi-way and the two-way. Going back earlier in the year, I think we had Trump up 7, then up 9. So it's been kind of all over the place. I think this one's an outlier low. I would probably say, with all this stuff with Harris going on right now, Arizona is probably like a 3 to 4 point race outside the margin of error. And I would say, Nevada is polling like Arizona right now. Hasn't been up quite as high in some of our previous polling, but is Trump +2 right now. I think that settles out to a +3 or +4, and we can get into it. But I think still my state polling is leaning left, but let's use the worst numbers for Trump here. And still those look like comfortable states.
No, yeah, I mean, those would be decent victories. I mean, he'd be outperforming in Arizona from 2016, and he'd be doing the best in Nevada based on the estimates that you have. So that too. And I mean, looking at Wisconsin and Pennsylvania right now, I mean,
Let's do Pennsylvania first. Yeah.
oh, okay.
I mean, that's what it all comes down to, right? Because he's at 268 right now on the map.
Right.
And he, in my last time I pulled Pennsylvania, July, Trump versus Biden was, I think, +3 and +4. Here with Harris, it's tied. Trump +1 in the two-way, Harris +1 in the multi-way. But after last Friday, the two-way is what looks more like the real race, right? And I think I just have a hunch that the RFK endorsement is going to play a little bit better in Pennsylvania than in other places. So to me, Pennsylvania is tied, but I will also say that our polling in 2020 for Pennsylvania was 6.2 left, and I really didn't change the weightings that much. So I would kind of be safe calling this one leans Republican.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's it.
Yeah, he's already
I
up.
haven't even talked about Wisconsin and Michigan.
Ryan, I think your Wisconsin numbers, you had a tie. You actually had a tie, but your Biden numbers in 2020 were up by 7. I'd almost be saying that this is probably even likely. If Trump's winning the popular vote by 2 or 3,
keep it light. Keep it light, Pink.
You think?
I mean, like my point, right? It's like the race is over. But yeah, it's tied right now again with data that was half collected during the DNC. I want to reiterate that point very clearly. And so between now and when we go into the states again in September, of course, a million things could happen. But this, unless Biden dies or something, what are the other high water marks for Harris? I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, she's already got Taylor Swift. Like, what else is there? If anybody has any ideas, drop them in the comments. Like, what else? Trump goes to jail?
No, yeah, that could be something that possibly could affect the race. I think that would benefit him anyway. I think if they throw him in jail, they'd be really stupid to do that, because every time something has come up, his polling numbers go up every time. So it's like,
no, that's true.
No,
it's hard to predict on the front side of those things what is going to happen, because people don't understand. People still, in some ways, do trust the judicial system in our country. A lot of people back before Trump was convicted said that, yeah, he should go to trial because maybe they'll uncover something, or if he's not guilty, he'll be not guilty. Now it's like really hard to judge how that would affect things. But what I can say is the Democrats, a majority of them, want Trump to go to prison. So there is that. And they would obviously have a sugar high like they did when Trump got a guilty verdict. But really, the biggest impact was way back in the March of 2023. And his indictment is what got his campaign basically immediately won the GOP primary for him. And there's no way to know what, honestly, this would do.
Right, 100%. Yeah, those things are hard to predict, but historically, he has gained momentum every single time something's happened like that. So I think if they throw him in jail, I believe it wouldn't be a smart political move. And I just think Trump's going to do way better in the driftless area. I think he may there may be a county or two in the wild counties where he may lose ground because those have been trending left. But I think that with Harris, it's just, Mark, I mean, if you want to comment on this, like, Harris is the first Democrat nominee, and I don't even know how long that really has no white working class Rust Belt appeal. Like, none. I mean, I don't know what issues she would have that would favor those voters. Like, I don't know what these voters in rural Wisconsin, or voters that are really, there's people out there that have really lost their jobs in the Rust Belt because of, overseas trading policies. And I don't see any appeal, because you could argue Biden may have had some appeal left to these voters, because, I mean, he ran with Obama. He's been in politics for years. It's not real, but it is some sort of support. But Harris doesn't have any.
Yeah, I wish I could pull up my other battleground poll from July. We had a few more issue questions. The most recent one was really all immigration related. I do think there are some things. I mean, first, you have to understand that a lot of people watch the news. A lot of people are low information voters. A lot of people vote because they're friends and neighbors, or they just don't care, but they know they're supposed to vote. So there
Right.
is that aspect to it. And yet, there's families that have just been Democrats for generations because they've been union workers or things like that. But then I would also say that there is a lack of general economic knowledge, and there are a lot of people that trust Democrats more on the economy. It's really hard to take a scalpel to why. Some of them it is because of the social safety nets. Absolutely 100%. The lower you go down on the income scale, there's more Trump support until you get to the bottom.
Yeah.
Depending on the poll, depending on where it is. And I honestly can't tell you if that trend holds up in the Rust Belt. I assume it does. But Trump on the economy nationally has, depending on the poll, a 5 to 10 point lead. Sometimes it's bigger if it's the issue of inflation.
Right.
So there's blame and attribution and economic understanding. And sometimes, like, Biden was just not really getting the blame for a lot of stuff because people like personality, right? So
Right.
I can say that Kamala Harris is probably not going to get the same benefit of the doubt from her personal appeal, but people remember Clinton. There's a ton of reasons why, but Republicans still have the edge, right? Like, that's what it comes down to, because inflation has really upset a ton of people, and they care a little bit about it less now because it's abating. But I think with 2 months to go, it's still going to be the number one thing in voters' minds.
Yep, I do too. And I think right now, Michigan, I don't know what your poll on that was, but I
I
think
had Harris +1 and Harris +3, and I think we should call it lean Dem.
you think them.
Lean Dem. Let's just draw the line here, right? Call that lean Dem, and Donald Trump still has a comfortable Electoral College vote lead, understanding that this polling was done probably at the worst time for Trump. And that's where we're at. That's the race. But again, with Harris +1 and Harris +3 in the 2 and 6 way, that's 7 points worse than Trump was doing, or 7 points better for Trump than he was doing in our polling. Not like in the New York Times, like in our polling. So say it's still 3 or 4 points. It makes it a tie to slightly lean Trump, really.
Right. That's the thing. Like it may be tilt Trump possibly, but like, yeah, I mean, even in other pollsters, he is doing 6, 7 points better, but your numbers tend to be a little bit more, moved closer to where it actually is than most pollsters.
Yeah.
Most pollsters, like some poll in 2020 had, I think it was Wisconsin. I think it was ABC Washington Post. They had Biden +17 in Wisconsin. Like, are you serious? Like, I don't even know how they did that. Like, they must have been lying.
I kind of do. I can elucidate people's. Again, I keep coming back to the national picture because there's so much more national polling. And even if the polls themselves aren't massive, and I think there's reasons to be cautious of pollsters, like, for instance, Morning Consult, that just continuously puts out N equals 10,000 people polls. There's precision versus accuracy, and a large poll gets you a lot of precision. But in my opinion, if you want to be accurate, I would rather take 10 shots than one, right? And then average them and then look at the demographics. And there's way more polling at a national level. And in my opinion, a lot of the state polling is harder, and for multiple reasons. One, the polls are smaller. Two, people do less of them. Three, the states have individual unique things that I can't for a moment say that I'm an expert on, and definitely everybody else isn't. Right. And then also there's a ton of ways. Well, I want to talk about data source too, but there's just a ton of tricks you can play at a state level, and you're not going to get called out upon it because there's going to be a bigger margin of error. You're going to do less of them. You're not going to do a final horse race poll. So in my opinion, people selectively use state polls, as we saw with New York Times Siena in the first week of August, to create national narratives. Oh, look how bad Trump's doing all of a sudden in state polling, but that's because we haven't been dropping any national polls for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the other is online panels are a problem for pollsters. And that's one of the reasons why I still think we have an advantage. People will dismissively say, well, you're still dialing people on landlines.
Which
That's because there's 90 million of them. If you look at the sum total of all of the people that you could reach through an online panel aggregator, I would be surprised if the number even gets to 1 million. So now if you take 1 million people and spread it out over 50 states, and then you realize, well, half those people never really log in, another half of them won't do it below a certain cost threshold, you're talking about maybe drawing from a pool of 5,000 to 10,000 people in an online panel in a state. That is not a representative sample at all. And of course, you can try and wait for it, but at the end of the day, you're getting a cross section of people in their pajamas in front of a computer taking a poll as fast as possible for money, when I'm still getting civic-minded people who want to tell a pollster a piece of their mind. So state polling is, again, like, it's cute. We do it. It's a content. It drives traffic. I'm trying to be accurate. But look at that national popular vote picture, right? Like, that's
right. Right. And it even doesn't make sense how, like, for example, Wisconsin being a tie, but Trump being up by 3, like, the state of Wisconsin is not going to trend 7 points to the left. So state polling tends to just be very difficult to track and do. And me and Gold Crown Politics, he's somebody else you guys should subscribe to as well, but he doesn't use any state polls in his modeling. And when I do my predictions, I mean, I like having my state averages weighing by party to try to give something accurate to people. But
yeah, like, all new data is good. It's good to have more data, and at the very least, it helps me validate my national picture to make sure I know I'm not missing things, or to, like, prove hypotheses to me, or just to see how I'm trending versus other pollsters. And these 2 big polls were useful. It showed the difference between Biden and Harris in the swing states.
Right.
It shows a really close race for sure, but, like, there's a million years between now and November 5th.
Right. And now people don't understand that. People who don't pay attention to politics, or even people who do, like, a week is a millennial. Like, a week, it could be a long time. I mean, Trump's assassination attempt and Biden dropped out in the same week. And we went from, oh, Trump's going to get 330 to, oh, now it's a tie rate. Like, anything can happen in a week, like, literally anything. And so before we move on to other things, I want your opinion on, like, some of these deep blue states like New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, Maine, Nebraska second. I mean, I think Nebraska second goes lean GOP, to be honest, because if Trump is winning the popular vote by 3, I don't think it's going to trend to the left by that much. And they just redrew the district to be more Republican friendly. So I don't really think that that's going to go Dem either. I mean, it's going to be close, but I don't think that it would go lean Dem.
Yeah, what was it? What was it in 2020?
It was Biden +7, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, now you're asking a local question about what happened in Nebraska. I think, based on what the national polling has done, if the trend holds up there, I mean, it makes sense that they're within striking distance. You know, I'd leave it blue on the chart. But yeah, like, a 7-point national change in polling makes a lot of new stuff.
It makes it especially in a smaller area, right?
Yeah. Without more data, right? You don't know if all of that's literally coming from the Dallas area, right? Or, you know, or if it's coming from somewhere in Florida, or if it's coming from Nebraska, but it's going to be something.
Right. Yeah, it is. And I think it's mainly California, Texas, Florida, New York getting closer. I think that's what it is.
Minnesota. Trying to see if we did Minnesota in the 2020 cycle. I don't think we did.
I personally think that New Mexico right now, it's a little hard because we don't have that much data. But again, Biden in the polling right now is doing 3 to 5 points worse in some of the polls compared to 2020. I think it may be possibly a 4-point win for Harris, considering that if she's really losing with Hispanics I mean, if she's even tied with Hispanics, she's probably going to be within the margin of error in New Mexico. I have it as lean Dem right now. Virginia.
That was a really big Biden win in 2020. That's a tough one.
It's also,
yeah, I would say, I mean, it definitely leans Democrat. Like Trump's going to do better there. I still think it'll be mid single digits to low single digits Trump loss.
right. No, that's kind of what I think it could be like 4-7 for Harris. And I kind of have it on like the 4-5 end. So like, because my thing is like tilt is 0 to 1%. And then one is like, lean is 1 to 5%, and then likely is 5 to 15, and then anything above 15-point wins are safe. That's what I go off of usually. Virginia, I actually want you to do this one because we have had 3 polls back to back that have been within the margin of error. Like, I want to know your opinion on that because we have it it's within margin of error in the polling, regardless of the fact that all the other swing states, the polling has gotten better for Harris, but not in Virginia. And a lot of the pollsters in Virginia that have been polling, 2 of them were not that far off in 2020. I mean, they overestimated Biden by like 1 to 2 points. So I want to know your opinion on Virginia.
Yeah, let me pull up the Virginia polls on Real Clear Politics. Is this it? There's only...
Yeah, there's only 3. There's like 2 or 3 probably. There's
New York Times, Siena. New York Times, Siena had Harris +4 in Virginia. I would just say, like, if you put a gun to my head right now, that New York Times Siena is 4 points to left. So yikes. Here's the problem. Only 661 people, 4.5-point margin of error. It is likely voters. It went, I think it's fair to say Youngkin's doing okay in the state.
Yeah.
But it was a 10-point Biden win.
Yeah. It may be. I think it's similar to New Mexico. I think it's like 3 to 6 for Harris right now. I think it may be like 4 to 5, kind of similar to New Mexico. I think it's like 3 to 4 right now, especially if Trump's doing that much better nationally. Because, the state may trend a point or 2 to the left, but not enough to be likely Dem in R +2 to 3. So I think it may be lean. Now, Minnesota this cycle, I think this one's interesting because it trended to the left, but I think it may actually continue to trend to the left to the point where I think Harris probably wins it by 4 to 5. It could even be likely Dem. I don't know. And with Walz there, there may have been a certain reason why she picked Walz in Minnesota. I don't want to go too much into details, but maybe there's something a little deeper there. But I do think that it may be like a 4 to 5-point win for Harris right now.
Trump was down 7. The national popular vote moved 7 points, at least to the right. At least.
Right.
I would say based on our Wisconsin polling, our Wisconsin polling matches what Biden did in Wisconsin back then.
Right.
But our polling was 7 points. I don't know. It's still going to be lean Dem. I just don't, it's like, what are let me pull up the polling there too.
Right.
What's it looking like on Real Clear Politics?
It's probably like 4 to 5. I'm not sure. Maybe like a 4 to 5 point lead, maybe a little bit more because a lot of the polling data has been like really skewed. Let me see if they even have an average right now. I don't even think they have an average for that right now, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't even have an average for it. Let me click on this. Oh no, they do have one. It's Harris +8. There's no way. It's Harris +8.
Fox News.
They have it as +6, and then the Survey USA poll. Oh my god!
Just how I'm familiar with Fox News and how they poll versus us, and I would call that a Harris +4 race right now. Then most likely. Yeah. Here's the problem, though. If you go back and look at the dates, that was literally the week of her coronation.
Yep. And you know what's pretty funny? I think it's kind of funny that the second Biden dropped out of the race, they stopped polling all these deep blue states. Before, you had New York polls every week, you had New Jersey polls, leaks coming out, you had New Mexico data showing it within like 2 or 1 point. Minnesota was being polled all the time, and all of a sudden, now that Harris is the nominee, they just stopped polling all these states. I think that's a little concerning. I feel like they honestly should have kept polling those states. If Biden was doing that bad in those states, I think they should have kept polling those consistently. And we don't even have that as much. Well, I think right now we have more state polling data, but we have less national data, which is kind of interesting. And I think that
this is one of the ways the industry is carrying water for Democrats. And I called this out. And again, I'm from outside the industry. I've been here 3 years. I was trained by a predecessor, but I'm continuously surprised. And let me tell you, the more scientific somebody explains polling, the more I think personally they're trying to lie to you through obfuscation. This is an art for sure, not a science. And if you understand basic statistics and you have integrity, that's the key point. If you have integrity, it's not a hard job, but it's also a very hard job because polling is very hard to do, right? For me, it's easy to have integrity, but I'm constantly surprised by these hijinks. And I text Rich and he's like, oh yeah, they do this all the time. If you look at just the number of polls on Real Clear Politics, and I will admit, and listen, I love these guys. They are honest and trying to do the best they can in an industry full of crooked players. They have standards, and if the poll passes their standards, they put it up, like period, end of story.
Right.
And I went back and counted by week, all the way back to the beginning of May, how many national polls were put out between Trump and Biden and then Trump and Harris. And for June and July, the average was like 8 to 15, depending on the week, national polls. For the first 2 weeks of August, there were like 3.
Right.
And it's like we just had a candidate switcheroo. One of the biggest things that's happened in politics in like decades, if not, 100 years. And all of a sudden, everybody's just like whistling and turning the other way. Yeah, and so that's just one way that they've been putting thumb on the scales. And look at this. We've just saw 2 blue states where everybody polled the week that she became the candidate, and then they just disappeared.
Yep.
They're gone. And I think there's a lot of it. We got the results we wanted, and so there's no reason to be any curious. And I'll tell you, listen, I would love to go poll those states. I think I would do it more accurate. But what it comes down to is if I have money to spend, unless I
know places where it's going to decide the election.
Unless I know that Pennsylvania is for sure safe Trump, then there's no reason to pull Virginia. There just really isn't. It comes down to Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin. Like that's what everybody's going to look at. That's what matters. Nevada.
Right.
And anybody, in my opinion, who's polling those blue states, it's more like, hey, let's just reassure everybody that these are safe. That's
right.
And then, like also nobody wants to put their neck on the line and call like Tudor Dixon up 50 points or whatever. Sometimes happens on the right side of things, but
right. I think right now, just to end off this segment of the episode, I think Maine and New Hampshire probably, it's a little hard because Trump is doing a lot better with these younger millennials, and these are really elastic states, and they don't tend to like incumbents a whole lot. In my predictions, I honestly sometimes put them anywhere from tilt D to lean D for some of these races. But I'd say for the sake of this video, I'm going to probably put these in the lean Democrat column. And what we'll do now is we're going to look at these people from 538. And if you want to talk about your experience with them, I'll go ahead and mention that before we kind of look at their latest election model.
Yeah, just a point about New Hampshire, I'd also say, though, it's look at the exit polling, which, again, can't take always for granted, but 2020 was 46% independent. RFK is going to absolutely affect New Hampshire in ways that need to be pulled on for sure.
Yeah. I think that it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think it's going to be within 2, to be honest. I think it's going to be I think that's actually going to be like a razor tight race. I think it's going to be close again, like it was in 2016. But go ahead. And
538. I don't want to throw too much shade. I'm a nice human being, and I also understand that some people might be watching this that aren't fully attuned to everything that goes on in polling and in the media. But 538 was founded by a man named Nate Silver, who I think had some really great ideas, and I think ostensibly did his best to create a prediction model that tried to account for some of the problems in polling, which is the fact that some different pollsters are more accurate than others. Some have house effects, and ostensibly you could build a model to correct for those things. I think over time, it's questionable about whether there's been any statistical lift, which is what you would try and measure to determine whether this has been accurate. Well, what I can say is that this has been a pretty hot football that's been passed, or got bought by New York Times, and I don't know how, but somehow ABC News wound up with it, and that rolls up to Disney, and they've spent millions and millions of dollars heavily producing this site, and it gets a lot of traffic. I think maybe it gets less traffic than it did before, but we've always been a member of the 538 aggregate. In fact, in 2020, we were one of Nate Silver's most accurate pollsters, and I think our ratings swung around, but I think it was in the B range, and that's pretty good for the most hated conservative-leaning independent pollster out there. Their words, not ours. But what happened is they fired, he left, whatever. Nate Silver is no longer running 538. Happened back in March or April, and about a month after that, they started sending us emails asking questions about our methodology. And listen, I'll tell you anything you want to know about our methodology. It's not rocket science, but I could feel an ulterior motive in the emails, so I kind of just said, yeah, maybe I'll get to it someday. I actually typed a response and then deleted it because I was like, why are they asking me this stuff? I mean, it's on our methodology page. And there's one specific question too I thought was loaded. We talked about phone numbers and panel depth. And listen, there's people in the field that have proprietary panels. Nobody knows how big those are. We prioritize landline calls to people who we think will pick up the phone. There's 400,000 of those people. You can kind of call that a proprietary panel in many ways. I'm sure it's 50 times bigger than the one that New York Times or whoever has, right? And it's definitely more depth when combined with online panels than the online panels are themselves. So we have a lot of trust in our methodology, but I could feel that they were going to try and grind an axe on that one. And then all of a sudden, the new CEO, director, whatever you want to call him, G. Elliott Morris of 538, sent us the most insolent email about how we needed to respond within 72 or 36, whatever hours, or would be dropped. And we needed to answer why we associate with right-leaning blogs and fringe conspiracy theorists. Like, one of them was Steve Bannon, and one of them was Fox News, of all people. And if Fox News is fringe conspiracy theorists, like, and again, why do they care how we distribute our information? That has nothing to do with our polling. And they were very accusatory that they may be feeding us ideas. Who does it matter where our ideas of questions come from? And we have integrity, and like everybody else, disclose any sponsors. And so there were all these implications that they didn't like our ideology and the topics that we polled on. And that was the reason that they were dropping us from the aggregate. So when we got that nasty email, we just told them to pound sand. And of course, it was 6 months until they dropped us out. But I can tell you now, when I go and look at 538, and it's a black box model, like who knows what they're actually doing to the numbers. They're adjusting it. That's a feature, not a bug. And there are reasons I look at that site and say, well, this can't make sense. The very first one I will bring to your attention is the fact that New York Times Siena themselves came out and said that with their Harris +3, Harris +4 numbers, they're probably oversampling Biden supporters. So if that's true, and they are in the Real Clear Politics aggregate, and the aggregate only leads Harris by 1.5, how come the current 538 prediction is Harris +3.6 or whatever it is? Why are they left of the RCP average when they should be making up for the fact that people in the polling industry are oversampling Democrats. And so I can only now assume that it's become a tool of propaganda.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with my average. Again, I don't know if I'm going to be right or not. It's kind of like you. I mean, yeah, this is an art, and I'm trying to see if this ends up being somewhat around what happens. I mean, if I get it right, I mean, hey, like that's good. I'm not saying this is going to be 100% accurate, but I'm trying to account for whatever polling error there could possibly be. It may not be perfect, but I think I'm trying to be an honest aggregator, and hopefully I am correct, and we could end up being mainstream in 2028 and going forward. But Harris is not above 50% in the national popular vote. Like, it's just not happening right now. And win probability,
3.6, right? Yeah.
they have Harris at 52. So she is apparently doing better than Biden was somehow.
Like 3.8 now, almost 4 points. Okay. So you have New York Times Siena, ostensibly one of the most trusted mainstream media news, probably spends millions a year on like 50 different people to do their polling. And they're at Harris +4, and they say that our polling oversamples Democrats. Then you have a political prediction site that takes all of the information from the entire industry, which leaned left in 2016 and 2020, and is just as far left. So they've corrected nothing. What value do
we actually probably even inflated some of the numbers based on what we were looking at in their average? Like because what they do, and I'm going to pull this up really quick on my screen, they actually have SoCal Strategies poll here with me and Ready Go Politics, and for whatever reason, they've just like for no reason, they've just put Ready Go Politics as a partisan sponsor for the Republican Party. Unless Red Eagle has lied to my face in person, that's not true. Like, it's just not, it's not true. It's not. Like, there's even other websites that, like, the tweet was community noted about one of the polls we put out in Pennsylvania that showed Trump up by 1, which is sort of similar to what you have. And they had a tweet, they community noted saying Ready Go Politics has dark money involved. Like, that's ridiculous. That's not true. And
well, you know, you're a crowdsourcer. Hey, if you're watching this video right now and you gave money to On Point Politics, you're probably a member of the Iranian National Guard, or you're probably a member of the KGB. You might not know that, but 538 thinks that.
Yeah. But like, look, like right now, like somehow on August 23rd, they had Harris in a data point at like 52, 53%, and Trump is at 40. There's no polling on August 23rd that has that kind of a lead. I mean, you have August 24th with Harris +7, and you kind of
it might be two overlapping polls, but the point is that I found crazy is if you go back to that one in mid-August, it looks like a 36. I don't think we could find that anywhere.
Like, what is Harris is at 48? Trump's at in the high 30s. Like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. And looking at some of their state margins, like apparently Nevada and Arizona are going to move to the left, and Pennsylvania becomes more Democrat than 2020. Or like in Nevada and Arizona move to the right. Well, Nevada moves to the right from 2020, but Arizona moves left. But Pennsylvania becomes more Democrat in Wisconsin, but Michigan only becomes 0.1% more Democrat, and Florida's only R+4. They can kiss my ass. There's no way that Florida is going to be 0.6 percentage points more Republican than it was in 2020 when you had 1 million+ net registration gains for the Republican Party in Florida. Like, it's just not happening. Till North Carolina, even going based off their aggregate, this is how I know they don't understand what they're doing. And you know this too. They have Harris up in the popular vote by 3.8%. The state of North Carolina votes to the right of the nation by 6 points. There's no way that it is only it's going to trend 3 points to the left of the nation when it's been stagnant for the past 8 years. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then they have second at R+6, by the way.
What I would ultimately point back to when trying to understand this is that they've created a statistical model. Who knows how much human intervention is involved in it or not? Maybe none at all. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting a feeling here that they're trying to be super accurate, because I think what's going to happen is no matter what they predict, it's going to be the same as the last 2 times out. 538 is going to lick their wounds and then still get funded to the tune of millions of dollars from their corporate overlords. So what incentive do they have to be accurate? It's not going to, I mean, are they going to really fire G. Elliott Morris if he blows it by being 3 or 4 points too left? I don't really think that's what's going to happen.
Look at this. They have these possible scenarios. Harris is 5 times more likely than Trump to win with over 350 electoral votes.
Wow.
Even on the best night, she's not getting over 319. Like, she's not winning anything more than Biden 2020 plus North Carolina. That's like her ultimate best case scenario. Like, if Trump just like completely, like if Trump started having dementia in October, that would be the election result. Like, it's just, there's no way.
They have equal odds of winning with less than 350 votes, but she's up 3.5 points in the national popular vote. Whatever.
Harris's national poll, her chance of winning the national popular vote is 71 out of 100, but Trump's is 30 out of 100.
Yeah, but then look at the 2 lines above it. How contradictory is that?
Harris is 7 times more likely than Trump to win the popular vote by 10 points. And she is, and then like we see here, Harris wins at least one state Biden didn't win in 2020, 60 out of 10.
So here's another way I would sum it up for your viewers. Okay, go back up. She's got about a 1 in 5 chance, according to 538, of winning the national popular vote by 10 percentage points. We have never showed Kamala Harris beating Trump in a single one of our released polls. We were within about 1.5 points when looking at average numbers in 2020, and I think within the margin of error, within like a point in 2016 on the national popular vote. We have never showed Kamala Harris winning, but she's got a 1 in 5 chance of winning by 10% in a black box model that is ostensibly picking the best polling and adjusting it to make it even more accurate. This is a propaganda tool.
And look, and this kind of proves your point. I don't know if you looked at this part of their thing. No, look, this is going to prove your point. What do polls or fundamentals say alone? What are fundamentals either way? What is that? But what they do is they get the polling average, and then they adjust their average for the effects of party conventions. And then what they do is they forecast what they think the polling average is going to be. So that means there is human intervention, because they're literally predicting what their own polling average is going to be on election day. And that's 88%. They have this fundamentals only forecast, which is 13% of the weight, that happens to somehow have Trump a point doing better. But they're forecasting what they think that is. And this is what they do to get their state margins. Like, that is not what I'm doing. I'm getting all of the polling data that we have and weighing it to a target electorate. And I mean, I may not be doing this 100% accurate, but it's going to be correcting polls that have Biden, a Democrat, plus 8 samples to being tied. That's going to be way more representative.
You're doing it the right way. I think independents are going to be, I think that conservatives have been fleeing the Republican Party. And I think some more conservative Democrats have as well. I think the independent number is going to be higher than that. But again, it's like, who knows who's going to be right. It's a good take you're making. I can't believe 88%.
No, you saw that, right? They literally have 88% weight on what they think the polling average is going to be. So now what the current average says,
somebody is typing a strongly worded long tweet right now about how we're totally wrong about this. I guess my point is I don't care. It's at this point, to us, they've proven themselves to be ideologically driven. Here's what I'll say. Right now, 60% of likely voters in this country think the media is the enemy of the people. If you're one of those people, we would love to have you as viewers. If you're not one of those people, go read the New York Times and go look at 538.
Right. And it's like, yeah, on Twitter, you see all these people dooming when they look at the 538 forecast, or they look at polls that have overestimated. Like, I was on a space yesterday with somebody named Rufus online. You may or may not know who that is. He's been really dooming. He wants to write in DeSantis because, oh, more immigration, or oh, more abortion, or something like that. But
Yeah.
basically, he's like, oh, the polling in Wisconsin looks bad for Trump. He's down 7. And I'm like, but Trump is still doing better than he was against Biden's 2020 polling. Like, Harris is only up in the aggregate. Like, they were all telling me, oh, the average looks horrible for Trump. And she's up by 1.5 in Wisconsin. Biden was ahead by 6.5, and he barely won. And the same thing happened in 2016. Yeah. Like, these pollsters, I mean, there's people who are just like, oh, but why can't the polling be better this time? Why do you have to say? It's because I look at their samples and I look at what their crosstabs are, and it just doesn't make any sense. And even in Arizona,
I mean, it is better for Trump this time for sure. Well, you said the magic word is crosstabs. Okay. I'm assuming you go into a lot of crosstabs on your channel, and I would say that anybody could do it. You don't need to be a public opinion professional to click through, find the crosstabs. I don't have time to do all this stuff, but like, I know a lot of these polls are garbage. You can spot garbage polls yourself. It's really super easy to do. The first thing you do is go in and look at all the ways they weighted the poll. See if you can find out how big the sample is, and whether or not it was regionally targeted, and whether they shifted their demographic weightings from last week. What does their 2020 makeup look like? A lot of those have been really way off, like New York Times. And then start looking at the results and saying, well, do they match like what I expect? It's like, oh, Rasmussen's a pretty accurate pollster, and they had Biden losing independents in 2020, but now they have him winning independents for the last 3 years, Trump winning independents. But now New York Times has independents going to Kamala Harris 5 or 10 points, whatever. Like, then you'll know that the polling's garbage yourself. You won't have to rely on black-pilled people on Twitter. Just do it yourself. Ignore those people.
Yeah, anything like, for example, anything that has Trump within 5 with whites is garbage. Like, it's just not happening. It's not happening. Like, there's no way Trump is winning white voters by under 5. Like, or even it's competitive. Like, anything that has that, it's just not true. And I wanted to have Mark on the show because I think it was important to have one of the industry's most accurate pollsters, who a lot of people, again, I don't know what this is. I don't know where this really came from. It seems like whenever people are more accurate in their assessments, you just automatically get labeled as a right-wing pollster. But I try to bring as much attention to this kind of stuff as possible. And I wanted to have Mark on to really explain what his numbers were, so that people can see that there are people out there who really want to be honest with their polling data, and that actually want to do this to provide accurate information for voters to see. Because I think it is important for people to know some of these things. I think it is. But when you have all of these headlines that have data that it's just not going to happen, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I think the most important thing for me is to show you that there's just another human on the other end of the polls that you're looking at. And I don't report up to some massive corporate hierarchy that has an invested interest in some political outcome. I want to be accurate. We were called right-wing pollsters, I think, back in 2016, just because we called it like we saw it, which was like, hey, Trump's got a shot. And of course we were right, and a lot of people weren't. And that same thing happened in 2020. Now, that was a worse race for Trump for sure. But if people are going to call us a right-wing pollster and boot us out of the aggregate and try to cancel us and whatever, then I guess we're going to lean into it. And what that has freed us up to do is to poll on all of the public opinion topics that you're not going to see mentioned in the news. And to me, that's the most important work we did. To be honest, maybe you could sense it. I don't love talking about political races. I love the numbers. I love the questions. I love the reason why people pick the candidates that they do. And it's like, sure, I like the Electoral College is important. I think our state polling tells you the answer right there. If those numbers like survive to November, Trump's likely going to win enough of those states, considering this is probably Kamala Harris's high watermark. But What about the fact that everybody's lost trust in our judicial system? What about the fact that everybody had COVID forced down their throat and are not happy about the safety of certain therapeutics? What about election integrity and all these other topics? Those are topics that every pollster attached to a media organization is unable or unwilling to poll on. And that's something that we've done a lot of. So if you're interested in hearing that kind of stuff, the second the election's over, that's what we're going to be doing again. And I mean, it's humble work, it's lonely work, but I love doing it.
Right. And of course, well, thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. It was a good discussion. We were able to talk about a lot of different things, guys. Make sure to go subscribe to Rasmussen Reports. They provide some of the most honest, transparent polling analysis that you can find in the industry, some of the most accurate numbers from 2016, 2020. So make sure to go ahead and subscribe to them, follow them on X as well. And make sure to subscribe to us here at On Point Politics. If you're new, hit the like button, subscribe. That definitely helps us out. And, comment what any of your opinions are. If you have a question for Mark or me, hopefully, I don't know if this is going to get flooded or not, but we'll try to attack some of the questions as much as humanly possible. But thank you guys for staying till the end, and we'll see you guys hopefully in another video.